Evo sačetnik. Zove se Motovun film festival, netočno podne, 2 točke Berlin Babylon. Sad bi treba vidjeti. Super. Čudo, čudo. Ajde.
Šta čaša?
Vidi dole.
Evo ga sve čekaj. Znači, čaše... 8 ih ima. To je tamo. U ovome blagajni. Da zamijenim ove dvije. 8 čaša. Tu ću sve pustiti, pa oni ne znam.
Rađe na stol tamo, ja sam isto divim.
Rađe na stol.
Tamo, na stolicu ja sam imati mikrofon. Ona ne bude tu. Što je manje nego što je bilo, ali ono je...
BERLIN BABILON. Ja sam samo izgledala poslova Niku Radić i Aleksandru one emitajali tamo. Paula.
Ne, sad ću ja samo vode dolijem.
Nema, daj.
Nema baš nešto.
Pusti, neka bude na stolu.
Šta zna ako neko će sisti nešto? To ne jebe. Onda dobro. Onda dobro. Ne sam nešto drugo.
Da je tamo iza još jedan stol.
Imaš ove vodenikove?
Mineralno.
Ne, nešto, to je neko treba poći prije.
Šta to je već bilo?
Ma da. Mislim, nisam gadljiv, nego neko će pit valjda.
A drugo ne, ponijeli su čo?
A ne.
Ja bih rado posudila jedan stativ noćas. Je li to moguće?
Kada bi vam to trebalo?
Zapravo u zoru. Ja bih htjela snimiti
Stativ za?
Za kameru,
Onda ćete
fotoaparat.
to sa gospodinom. Ja sam za audio.
A ovaj gospodin je za video.
Tako je.
Dobro.
Mogu vam posuditi, nikakvog problema.
Odlično, onda hvala.
A kad je?
Pa treba mi, mislim, ja bih ga rado uzela navečer tako da mogu to nedoba jutarnje se ustati i stati tu s kamerom.
Mene samo treba sutra u ovo doba kad bude idući raj i to je
Dobro,
to.
pa jel ga mogu ja onda poslije staviti u hospitality jutarnje?
Mogu, kako već. Idealno. Hoćete mi dati neki kontakt samo da vam ja onda...
Evo, ja se zovem Nika.
Ja sam Andrej, drago mi je.
Nika, da one svoje ruke zauzete, ovako trepstiramo da se razbudi.
Pa dobro.
Niko nije budan još.
Nika 091
091
505
505
9820.
Ja vas ne zove sam i
Prosti ime sam zaboravila.
Andrija.
Neću sad ići do torbe koja
Ma,
mi je
dobro,
tamo
nije.
jer mi je to daleko, ali poslije se sjetiti. I ako nešto drugo ću nazvat natrag i mislim ko me zvao, ali to je isto. Super, hvala.
Riješeno.
Hoće li sad još i kiša past?
Kažete koliko?
To je berlinski.
Kažete u jednog hoće?
Jedan.
Korin koji je iz Londona, a živi u Berlinu već jako dugo, veli da Berlin ima više kišnih dana od Londona.
Ozbiljno. Jer su za najkišovitiji grad u Europi za 2015. je bila Rijeka. Da, i to je za 7 ili 8 deci šišala London.
Dosta? Dosta?
Da.
Butelja.
Jer je, kako dolazi sa kiša prije brda, naravno tu se mora isprazniti da bi se dizala gore. U Rijeci je uvijek kiša.
Ja samo doćem rijetko pa nisam natrapala.
Da, je, baš je procijenjen je kao najkišoviti grad u Europi za taj, ja mislim da je bila 2016. Ali inače London je, da, dosta.
A u Berlinu je stalno nešto. I ima ovu isto...
Očekivano. Šta mi je uvijek?
Kiši sve počeo.
Kako se ja sjećam što sapio majkom? Evo.
Ja, Lina, ja imam najbolju priču za tebe ikad. Da čujem.
Karlovac. Pa taj sa šlagom.
Okej.
Lagano.
Ali stvarno se nismo vidjela uopće. Znači, prvo mocanje probudilo, ona rekla ja ti spavam svega dobro i to je bilo to. Ili ja spavam ili ona spava. Odlično. Daj, hoćeš nas upoznat. neće gledat ja, mislim, ne može me faliti, jel?
Možda ćete vi znati je li ovaj stol isto zauzeti. Znate da ne znam, ali ja mislim da možete.
Da, u principu možete na sve stolove. Da vam maknemo smeće. Hoćeš vode?
Da, čije ovo?
Ničije, nije otvoreno.
Ja sam bio mislio. Jevem, što će vode.
U biti možda je nečije, a sad nema veze.
Nije otvoreno, dobro.
A nije otvoreno, možda sam nekome dala prije tebe.
Ma nije.
Jesi ti me vratila duanu? Jesam.
U vrtu dole. Oni ga zaljevaju ujutro.
Da, u 6 sati. Jesi ti vidio onu travu?
Sve. Ali ja sam pokrio sinoć plejere i sve to, ali su mi torbe sada pune vode i laptop je dole ovoga koji nije bio baš pokriven kako treba.
Je otišao?
Ne znam. I vidit ću kasnije.
Šta ne vide po čemu strice?
Da, mislim da ih nije briga.
A to nije moje. To nije moje. Isto tako kad neko pitaš nešto, biš mnogo moje se pomoći.
Čak ponudi.
Prosto trenutno imamo 8 ljudi, mislim 8 stolica.
Kao njih će baš 8 biti u
Pa
istom trenutku.
sad kako gledam, da, pa mislim tako nešto.
Jer,
8 je za sada, da.
mislim, možemo utrpati još 2 stolice, ali ono sljedeće jedno
Da napravimo ovako, razmaknemo više tamo, stavimo još jednu stolicu tu i jednu tamo na ovom stranu.
ali neće se vidjeti, treba iz kamera sve uhvatiti ravno. Ma hoćemo nekako, onda će se...
Hoće biti šta, bit će simpatično.
Pa dobro, tu isto.
Family atmosphere.
Pa da, samo ćemo onda dodati nešto je vode.
Ne, pa to je to, ima ih 8. Ima 8 voda, samo ima 6 stolica.
Evo, bez pera.
Dobro, pa super.
Ne, ste u jedan.
Da. Svi idemo.
Oni koji su prvi će vas neće, će možda sjesti ovdje.
Da, da.
Is there an order? Well,
Napokon.
Ja sam se čekala, sam pozvala.
Da, super si spavač, ništa, ne krčaš, ne mičaš se, ništa.
Super.
Nisam niti čula, niti vidjela, samo onu prvu večer pogled.
Da, ajme ko je ovo.
Identično je bilo i s druge strane.
Predobro.
Ja sam čula ko je ušao unutra, pita ko spavaju.
Pa to je ovaj kao, joj ko je ovo krevet. Ja nisam znala gdje da stanem. Tako da...
Jel treba pomoć oko njih 8 i bit će užasno, užmovito.
Dobar kadar,
Ich stehe auf Shit, ich stehe auf Shit. Original? Misliš o tome? Talked about it ages ago. Pa da,
Do tebe znam. Problem je jedino što vidiš svi mesta jako malo.
Ne, hoću samo nešto spominja.
Da, znam.
Rekli smo, onda su kao rekli da ne treba.
It's more like
Dobar dan. Samo za početak ću da najavim ovaj razgovor na temu Berlina. Later we will switch to English because we have quite international guests. And so, za početak samo da kažem da danas razgovaramo o fenomenu grada Berlina i da uživajte u razgovoru. Nažalost nismo obezbedili prevod istovremeno, ali šta je tu je. So, the topic today is the city of Berlin because it's somehow became the neighboring part of Motovun, or the part of Motovun. We have the walls as well. It is great, and here we have several artists who are living and creating in Berlin. First we have Nika Radic, the artist and sculpturist and artist, let's say, visual artist. Then we have Ana Felicia. She's originally from Moldova, film director. She's a member of the jury here, but at the same time, one of emerging film directors who are creating in Berlin. Then we have Mark Rieder. Yesterday, probably most of you couldn't sleep, and it's Mark's. Yeah. You played on Mark. Mark Rieder is a music producer and musician, and let's say, I have to say, like creator of this amazing film yesterday, B-movie, Lust and Sound in West Berlin. And this is a really nice privilege as well to have it here. Yeah. Then we have Uli Schippel. We had the chance to see here two amazing films he did. One is Planet Alex, let's say the first digital film shot on, well, more or less on DV as a feature film, which was presented at many festivals around, and Berlin song as well. So, as a film director, most of the films are directly dedicated to the city, or the topics come out from the city. Yeah. Then we have Alexandra, the directress. As well, we had a chance to see her film in the program dedicated to Berlin. And unfortunately, the last in the line, but film director. Yeah, it's the Wolfgang Fischer. His film Sticks was presented yesterday. It is, let's say, one of the strongest films we had in competition, in a way of being aware of the, let's say, the situation of today of migration and humanity in our time. Yeah, so we have a huge topic. Berlin is like a special city. But there is one maybe interesting thing, is that there is a different way of perception for Berlin. I think the people all around the world think of Berlin as one city of opportunity, but people in Germany see, I think through the history, they saw the Berlin in another way. Yeah. So what can you say about this view from the Germans on Berlin? Because it is... usually people don't consider it as a typical German city.
No. Yes. I don't know. I moved to Berlin early 80s or late 70s. I've been very much late 70s in Berlin and early 80s. And West Berlin was a complete other country. So I'm grown up near Frankfurt West, and West Berlin was something completely different. It had nothing to do with other big cities in Germany, like Hamburg, Frankfurt, or Munich. Berlin was another country somehow, a complete other atmosphere, and in a way, I mean, things are changing very much. I'm sure we're gonna talk about that. The city is changing very much, so it's not that extraordinary as a place anymore, probably, I would say. But from its history, Berlin was always a kind of different thing for Germany, that's for sure. Everybody knows, so I don't know why I'm saying that, but that's how I felt it.
Yeah, but through the history it was always like different, as Weimar Republic had something completely different, new, and later it was, after the World War II, after the war, it was still like the place you don't go often. So if you can, as well as a German representative here, say a few words about this. Yeah, but you're originally.
Yeah, for me it's difficult to say anything because I'm born in Austria, I'm from Vienna, and for me it was like just to escape the bourgeois Viennese culture and single-minded. I mean, that's the reason why I went to Berlin, and unfortunately I couldn't share these experiences. I came to Berlin in '94, and that was unfortunately a completely different time, so I didn't sneak in all these crazy things going on, like tearing down the wall, and I've never been to the GDR, and that's a pity.
I forgot something which I found very interesting by moving to Berlin. At that time, Berlin was, the mail system was completely different to any other city or country wherever I went, because all people there, either they've been old Nazis or the young man never been to military. Everybody went from West Germany to Berlin for not going to the military service. So there was a complete different style of manhood or something. I think that was, for me, that was really something we will never experience ever again in another city nowadays.
Yeah, there was a special situation back in, let's say, '76, when you moved to Berlin from Manchester, which was really like, at that point, the city which the factory record started, a lot of things happened there at one point, but you left Manchester and moved to Berlin, and I mean, that time it was not at least fashionable to go there.
It certainly wasn't fashionable in England, because the Germans were always perceived as being the enemy. You know, it was like my parents' generation fought in the war, so for Germany was always this negative thing, and nobody ever went there, and they certainly didn't go there for the holidays, you know. And I just went to buy some records. You know? I thought I was into like electronic krautrock records and buying things like Popol Vuh records and things like this, Can, whatever. And I thought, if no one, having travelled to West Germany and being discouraged from going to Berlin, it made me more curious about Berlin. And I thought, if no one ever goes there, then there's probably record shops that are crammed full of all these like records that nobody will buy. And so I just went to buy some records and discovered this place that no one really knew anything about, really. You know, especially in the UK, nobody knew anything about Berlin. It was where the war had ended. That was about as much as we knew, you know. And it was a place that always, when you saw Berlin on TV, it was always something political, and it was always something negative. There was never anything positive. There was always something negative. And so to go there and find this other world, I was quite fascinated. The thing that kept me in Berlin, actually, was East Berlin, not West Berlin. Yeah? West Berlin was a bit kind of like conventional somehow, and I kind of get my head around West Berlin. But East Berlin was a totally different world. It was like a scene from Star Trek or something. I was being beamed down on another planet that resembled the same planet but was different. And the more I kind of like was intrigued about this Eastern European thing, that is what kept me in Berlin. And the more I kind of like stayed in West Berlin, the more I got absorbed into this new music scene which was just starting, you know. and being part of like the Manchester music scene, coming to Berlin and going to a shop that kind of only dealt with Western English records, like run by an Anglophile who wanted to have English new wave records. I kind of found a connection to my home in this little record shop, and I met Gudrun Gutt, and she introduced me to her circle of friends who were this kind of avant-garde West Germans all trying to flee the army. Yeah? And Berlin was a city of gay men and old ladies and draft dodgers, you know, people who didn't want to go to the army, and it was this kind of strange mixture, you know. And my very first, when I hitchhiked to Berlin, and when I got to Berlin the night, I didn't know what to expect, and you know, Berlin for me, I had no idea what it was going to look like, and we came onto the Kurfürstendamm, and it was all kind of glittery and lights and shops, and I thought, oh, it's just like West Germany, until we entered into Schöneberg, and then it was all these bullet-riddled buildings and ruins, and I was like, okay, this is what Berlin's about. And the next morning I went to just get some change to make a phone call to my mother, and I walked into a bar, and the person serving the drinks behind the bar at like 10 o'clock in the morning was a transvestite. 2 meters high transvestite with bright red hair. Now in Manchester we only had one transvestite. Right? That was it. He ran a after hours bar, which was only full of underage drinkers and police. Right? And this guy was called Fufu Lamar. That was the only transvestite we had in Manchester. To come to Berlin and just go to a corner pub on the corner and see all these old guys drinking schnapps at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and this guy working behind the bar in a polka dot thing. It was like that made me realise I was in West Berlin and I wasn't in Manchester anymore. So I was quite fascinated, and I never left. You know, it was like the more I kind of like stayed, the more things happened, the more things I discovered. I just like ended up staying there. But to be honest, I think that Berlin, for me, it's changed monetarily and like in real estate terms maybe, but the same kind of people still come to the city to flee their kind of like provincial lifestyles. They still come to Berlin because it's like still full of creative people. You know, you still can't make money in Berlin.
Yeah, there is one special thing. It was that as we had like East Berlin and West Berlin, how much for someone who comes from the East, like you, Anna, you came from Moldova, yeah? Do you have this sense of Eastern Bloc still in Berlin these days? Today, yeah. Well, or more or less.
Yeah, more east. You go in Berlin, you feel home. It's still there, and but I was not very much searching for it. Yes, it's really a world, another world if you go east, but it's really raining now under us. Where are the...
an umbrella, can we get an umbrella? We're getting salt.
The umbrellas, we got some presents, umbrellas, in the festival bag, remember?
I think the best way to now we can stop and then you come back because this is
okay.
It's going to stop soon, but
Yes, we will wait for this rain to stop and then we can continue. Yeah, sorry for this, but it's like normal life. Summer rain.
najtamnije od trojice, pa dobro je znati
Yeah, so yeah, we can continue. We were speaking about East Berlin and West Berlin, and this sense of for someone coming from the East, how much do we feel still this East Berlin thing in Berlin?
Yes, of course, Berlin was always a gate between East and West, and will always be. It's fascinating, this mixture and influence of immigration and exchange of cultures since long time, and you really feel it everywhere. And when I came, now we were talking about it, that in the 90s, after the wall fell down, you had a big wave coming from the east, former Soviet Union and the Balkans and the Eastern Bloc. And we were people searching like for very open-minded too, and for other possibilities to live and to become somebody in a profession or in a specialty that you could not really. In my case, for example, in Moldova, I could not study filmmaking in that moment, and it was clear if I want to be a filmmaker, I should find another homeland. And I came to Berlin, and this dream came true there. So, and I'm very happy to be a Berliner now. I can recommend to everybody. And also I liked very much that in that time I learned German, and I really like German language. I discovered like a new universe, you know, to go to all these theaters and to be so close to this culture and understand it in its deepness. And this is a bit changing. Now a lot of people in Berlin don't learn anymore German. We have a lot of English-speaking people. And this, with my Russian friends, Jewish friends from different countries, and we had really this common thing that we spoke each one with his accent German. And I liked it, and I miss it now a bit. And what can I say more? Yes.
We will talk more. We will go later again to the film scene in Berlin, but let's start with Nika, since you are an artist, visual artist, and you were quite successful here in your country, in Croatia, in Zagreb, and you moved. What you were searching there in Berlin as the artist? What was the idea?
I am Croatian. I was born in Zagreb, and this is where I lived most of my life. But I did live in so many countries apart from Croatia that it did influence the way I am. I lived as a child in England and in Canada, and then I moved back. And then I lived in Italy and in Austria for a while. So this kind of moving around is something that is very pleasant in Berlin, that it's not unusual. People ask you where you come from, but there's no prejudice, like no expectations when you say you come from somewhere, then you're some sort of person. And this is very refreshing, actually. And Mark said a word provincial in some context. And this is, I think, very interesting in Berlin, because I think Berlin is not provincial, not because maybe it is such an amazing arts scene, but there are so many people who have one foot in another country that they're aware that this is not the center of the universe. And I don't think there is a center of the universe anywhere. But if you go, for example, to London or to New York, they believe they are the center of everything, which is very outdated as an idea. There are many worlds out there. And because Berlin has so many people who have moved to Berlin and know about other scenes, this is something which I think is very nice in Berlin and which I like so much. How I moved is probably also typical. I was sitting in Vienna and didn't like it any longer, and wanted to was not sure. And then I received an email from a friend saying that a friend of hers got a residency in Paris and is renting out her apartment for 2 months, and who wants it? And then I thought, like, yeah, I'll just move to Berlin.
Yeah, except the art scene, definitely the film schools there are amazing. We have this DFFB thing, and I think the film industry somehow is based, part of it in Berlin. And not only because of Berlinale, but as well the tradition and Weimar cinema to start with. So Alexandra, you came there to the university, to film school, and what can you tell us? What did you receive there in Berlin as a special city as a filmmaker?
Yeah, first of all, I lived in Germany already for a couple of years before I moved to Berlin. We went to Germany when I was a child from Bosnia because of the Bosnian War. And it was a small city in south of Germany. And in the moment when I knew that I would like to work in film, it was clear to me I want to go to Berlin. If I stay in Germany, I want to go to Berlin. And then I started studying there at DFFB Film Academy, and this is also a very special place. It's not a usual university, and they give us a lot of freedom and also to go abroad to shoot our films in another country, like I did. I shot my film in Bosnia, and many colleagues from the university come also from all different countries from the world. So sometimes I think that my German, which I speak very well, got worse since I'm there in Berlin, because I talk to so many different people from different countries with their different interesting accents and also their very, very interesting cultural background. And this makes the city for me so special. Besides that, I need this city because of the film industry, and I think at least I need it, and also for inspiration. And also what happened to me is when after we left Bosnia, I was not so connected to the former Yugoslavia, people from former Yugoslavia living in Germany. I was totally disconnected, and it was fine for me. And then when I moved to Berlin, I met all these very interesting people who flee former Yugoslavian countries in a way, who left for different reasons, and who were very open-minded and interesting. So that's where I reconnected to my origins, actually, in a way.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. We can talk about it later. Yeah. Also, I wanted to ask this thing about migration. It changed a lot, especially nowadays. It is, let's see, I think at least there is like 10% of population on the world globally who are just traveling around trying to settle themselves. You were dealing with this topic in your film, and how do you see, as I know, not only because of the German policy regarding the migrations, there is as well the Berlin policy on this, which is quite righteous and free. Can you tell us a bit about this, like the newcomers coming to Berlin?
I mean, actually, I have never been to a film school, or I didn't study film. I was more studying art and psychology, and I was based in Cologne. And then there was the big change that Berlin became the capital of Germany. In former times, there was not a real capital. So it was Bonn, Cologne, Hamburg, a little bit Berlin, Munich, and then suddenly there is this black hole like Berlin, and sucks everything out from any other city in Germany. And the whole art scene was mainly based in Cologne, and there was the Art Cologne, and there were all the galleries, and they all moved to Berlin, and that's the reason why I followed them, because I was more familiar with the art scene than with the film scene, and that is my base. So, and I mean, I'm migrated from Vienna to Cologne, and then I moved to Berlin, and I'm based there. And concerning migration, I mean, it's crazy to see, in my perspective, how easy it is for me to travel. There are no borders. I can go everywhere. I have no problems. I can move from Austria to Germany, and on the other side you have got these people. They are completely out of focus, and also nowadays, I mean, migration, it's the theme which follows us for the next decades, and we have to find a kind of solution, but till now there is not a real concept. And we wrote the script for Styx, or we started with the movie 9 years ago, and it was before the peak of the crisis, of the tsunami, of the big wave, and there are these crazy terms. I mean, but it's human beings moving. It's not masses. There are stories. I mean, and they have their perspective and they have their reason to go on these rotten boats. So nobody does this by just, oh, it's a nice holiday trip. Let's visit Europe. And it's kind of cynical how we lead this discussion, and it's an attitude. I mean, our movie should be an attitude towards life, for humanity and against fear. And that's the reason why we did it.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Yeah, there is a certain thing, considering Berlin, the housing issues are special. Especially I know that in 60s there were huge riots, and 70s more, when with the squatting thing, and because there was a lot of space, but it was not used. So if you are a young guy coming there, you don't have a flat, but there is so much space around. In your film, B-Movie, you can see how this generation used to live there. So can you tell us about the Berlin housing and how it looks back in 70s and maybe today, like different?
Well, when I moved to Berlin, I didn't have a flat, of course. I just was hitchhiking, and the guy who was driving me to Berlin said, "Where are you going to stay?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'll find some place to stay." And he went, "Oh, you can stay in our house. The house what we live in is about to be torn down. It's going to be, they're going to be making a new block of flats. They're going to tear this old house down, and we're the last occupants of the house, and we're just waiting for a new flat." So I went to this house. It was a beautiful house with a marble staircase, palatial looking. I'm from working class Manchester. My parents were very working class, very socialist actually, and we lived in a council house on the very far arse end of Manchester, where the ceiling was like here, and like typical kind of like English home. And I came to this place, and it was a 6-room apartment with wooden floorboards and frilly bits on the ceiling, and a white marble bathroom. And these guys said, "Yeah, there's the flat upstairs. You can stay there because no one lives there." And it still had electricity and everything. It was like they hadn't turned it off. It was all there. So I had this 6-room apartment, and I lived in one part of this flat. It was so big. I was not used to living in such a. The rest of the rooms were just kind of like empty, And I had a balcony, and I was like, "Why are they going to tear this house down? It's so beautiful. Why would they want to tear this house down and build some kind of like concrete thing, And in actual fact, what happened was the people had to leave, and I obviously had to leave them when they left. And the week after, the house was occupied by other people. Suddenly, it was squatted. And I'd, in the meantime, got another flat, and I'm watching the TV in the local news, and I can see these people throwing Molotov cocktails out of my balcony, like at the police down on the street, and I'm like, this is bizarre. And this house is they saved this house. It became known as the Rainbow House because they painted a big rainbow on the side of the house, right? And this was like all boarded up and bricked up, and always these riots, in the street about this house. And it was like one of the first squatted houses. And but this house was saved from demolition. They kept it. So now you can go there. It's in the Winterfeldstraße, number 24. It's like you can see this house. It's a beautiful house, and it survived the Second World War. And it survived the squatting, like tearing down of these beautiful buildings. But other places like the Skalitzerstraße, there were all these wonderful houses which they tore down and built this monstrosity. And Berlin was always very cheap. Rents were always cheap. I stayed in a very small apartment, 22 square meters, with an outside toilet and an oven heater with coal, and no hot water. Thank you. Very dramatic. Yeah. and yeah, right, all right. When Nick Cave came to stay with me. Yeah, because I said to you, he was like, how do you live in Berlin? I'm like, if you come to Berlin, you'll find a place, just stay with me. And he'd been living in London, And he came to Berlin, and he couldn't believe that I lived in these kind of like pre-Victorian era house with no hot water. He was appalled by this. He couldn't believe it. You know, oven heater, and yeah, you had to get your coal to heat your flat in the winter time, but not because you went out all night, you went out all day. You know, like you never, sleeping. You missed the coal merchant; it was always closed, and so what you end up doing, you go to a club because the club was warm, and everybody else was there because they'd also missed getting the coal at 6 o'clock. You know, so I really didn't spend so much time actually at home. My stuff spent time at home, and the kind of scene in this period, you know, like lots of houses were being planned to be torn down. You know, like they wanted to tear this down, and the squatters, they saved the Berlin that you know today. This kind of fancy, beautiful Berlin you know today. That's only there because the squatters saved Berlin from being torn down. Otherwise, it would have looked like, say, some kind of social housing thing that they had this vision. It would have been just concrete, horrible monstrosities like Hanover or someplace. And so we have to thank the squatters really for saving our beautiful city and keeping it like it is. But in the meantime, of course, you've got all these people who came to Berlin after the fall of the Berlin Wall and realised this is a really nice house and it's very cheap. I wonder if I could buy it. And these people have created this cesspool, if you like, of greed, of like buying a property and thinking, I can rent this out. This image of like because they don't realise in Berlin we have like lots of rules and regulations when it comes to renting out apartments and things. But their idea is that I can rent this out to people for ridiculous amounts of money, like I can in London, where you have no rights. They can kick you out the next day, And in Berlin we have a lot of rights. So they invent this Airbnb business because they realise that they can't have this constant, people living there for expensive rents and stuff. And obviously this is going to happen, and it's the price of capitalism. We are now in a big city now, or a wannabe big city, Berlin, and they have created the rising rent problem, which is just greed. It's just greed. It's just people being greedy. We've lived in Berlin without this for so many decades. Suddenly, for it to be an essential part of our lives, where people are struggling to sort of maintain in a flat that maybe 20 years ago cost €100 marks or something to stay in, now costs 400 or 600. And it's like, why does it cost this amount of money? It's like what caused this? It's not like people are getting more wages or anything like this. They still earn basically the same amount of money, and it's just pure greed, really. It's just pure greed. But unfortunately, that's the price that people have to pay for wanting to choose this lifestyle. I find, we can all rebel. We don't have to.
Again and again. Yeah, there is a certain thing which we saw in all of these films. It's a nightlife of Berlin. Also, what I found out is most of you used to work in the bars as a bartenders. Yeah, because I know with Anna, Mark, he still did. Yeah, Uli, and somehow Uli, you were the part of this scene. You saw it from the other side of the bar. Yeah, and in the 80s, back in the 80s. So, do you see some change? Like, of course, yeah, you do. But from this time, from this period, these nightlives and these movements, how are they today? Is it changed for you? Is there some kind of nostalgia? Or
Well, we've changed. We got older, so everything is changing. I see still an incredible energy. I mean, I worked in a bar, but basically I worked because when I shot my first feature film, after 3 days we already had no more money, and then the bar financed the ending of the film. So that's why I worked for 4 years at this bar, basically to pay them off or something. But as Mark said, we didn't need any money. Basically, we didn't need any money, not for the rent. everybody worked somewhere, so everybody gave you a drink or something to eat, and you gave it back somehow. So somehow it worked in a different way. We had kind of socialist capitalism in a way this time, I think about. So these things might change, but I still see there's so many artists coming still over in the city, and there's such interesting scenes. Maybe I'm not that close anymore, but I see what's going on, and it's always too much going on, so you can't follow it anyway. And you want to work, make films, so it's hard to follow. But I still see the same kind of energy. I mean, the struggling is harder because, I mean, Mark talks about rents of 600 now, but basically it's 1,600. It's not anymore to 200 to 600 is really going. I mean, in my area, everything was. I moved right after the wall came down. I moved to Prenzlauer Berg in the East Berlin, and everything is sold by. They bought by Scandinavians, Greeks. Strangely, Russians. Yeah. So I don't know. This it's a different city in this sense. But the art scene and the young people always find solutions, and there's still an incredible creativity there. I think it's just changing, and it changed from the. That's what I'm so much in love with the city. It's changed all the time from the 20s, 30s, fascism. War after war. The techno didn't came that quick after than West Berlin and whatever. So there was this city was in a constant change. It's not like Paris and London where everything is settled and you live in a museum or something. So I hope I have a little bit. I'm moving away after I don't know. 35 years. My plan is to leave the city because I'm not inspired anymore. I think I did my last film this winter on Berlin a little bit, but I had a real trouble to still find pictures, to still find a visual, which is not already taken by TV, by thousands of Berlin films. It's really hard for a director to find images for this city anymore, and also this gentrification, the political situation, which goes more right way, even not in Berlin, but Germany in general, or everywhere in general, probably. So I'm about to. I mean, there still will be a little place in Berlin, but I'm thinking of moving finally. So. You won't see me again to talk about Berlin anymore.
You will talk about Istria and the sequel. That would
Move to Motovun.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So if somebody has apartment or to rent, less than 1,000.
Very inspiring.
Yeah. There is certain programs for young artists or for the artists in general. How is it to be a free artist in Berlin? Is there some special funds for it, and how does it work, and how to move there and work your art?
Yeah, this is a question. I am a freelance artist, and I keep getting asked this question over and over again, mainly from my mom. How do you make a living? It's difficult. I don't see any plan that I can say this is how it works. It moves from one year to another, and it's like then you make some money, then you don't. But Berlin does support the arts a lot. They did introduce, at some point the artists rebelled and said, and this is something that one can learn from Berlin, this sense of let's get organized and do something about the problems that are there. Not, I come from Zagreb. What we do is we have a coffee and a cigarette and complain. In Berlin, people say, what can we do? Let's make a Verein and something, and then kind of go and write letters and talk to the city government and something. So what the artists did a couple of years ago, they said we're actually sponsoring the city. The city lives of tourism, mainly. That's the main thing that brings money into the city. And most people come to see what the artists actually create in the city, whether it's music or visual arts or whatever. And the artist said, well, we need some of the money back because otherwise we can't survive, we'll all move out. And the city introduced something which is called the city tax, which is a couple of euros for every night that the tourists stay in the city. And this money goes into the funds which are then used to support the artists. So you can apply for what's a German, English word for stipendium? A grant. Or they also, there's, for example, in the visual arts, there's a very big scene in Berlin of spaces which are not commercial, which show visual arts. They can also get some grants, which, like prizes, which is, and this makes, I mean, you can't live only from that, but this is certainly some support which is not to be looked badly upon. And otherwise, I think it also has to do with the fact that a lot of people are somewhere else as well. So there is this thing of not being only in Berlin. It is hard to make money in Berlin. And the rents are getting higher and higher, and if it keeps on going like this is a pity, because I think, you know, there's a word which is being used very often also in Croatia when they make this glam new apartments, which is the word exclusive, and I like to remind what it actually means. Exclusive is when you exclude someone, so it's like you don't want some people in, and I think this is really bad for any art scene.
We have another guest who joined, another Berliner. It's Sebastian, film director of the film Victoria and many other films. You're as well. You are not born and raised in Berlin. You came from Germany as well. Yeah. So, what were your idea and thing when you moved there? Is it because of the films, the fundings, and the film industry, or just for life and fun?
To be honest, I think the most important choices you make in your life, you don't really know why. I mean, of course, there are always some reasons. To be honest, the main reason, to be honest, it was like this. Wherever I went, I wanted to leave. I always had this dream. I wanted to be in acting school, and once I was in acting school, it didn't take long for me to really hate it and want to leave. It was based in Munich, so that didn't help. So then I always wanted to be in Hamburg, so I finally moved to Hamburg and shot my first film. And after liking it for a little bit, I wanted to leave. I didn't hate it, but I wanted to leave. And I got to the point where I thought, maybe it's not about any of the places. Maybe it's me that I always want to leave. And I never had the dream of living abroad. So when I moved to Berlin, for me it was really like, wow, if I hate this and I want to leave, that's my fate. Then I have to accept it. And so far it has not happened, so I'm very thankful. And also, I always there's a lot of discussion actually within Germany about Berlin, whether it's pretentious or great, or, you know, there's a lot of skepticism all over Germany towards Berlin. And to be honest, I don't care. I don't need for everybody to love Berlin. I don't care. I love it. And if you don't go.
Also, I want to invite you, if you have any questions, you can raise, and as well, I can translate if you want. Yeah, it's not a problem. So, we can continue. I want to ask, there is this certain thing that many people who create in Berlin and live in Berlin, they usually they are one step in their own country. So, in your case, with the cinema, like Motovun cinema, you almost don't see anything, but most of the directors work abroad and make some films. How was it for you moving to Berlin? Was it helpful for you to create the films in a right way, to put it in to find the fundings?
Sure. I made my last 2 movies in Moldova with German money. This is clear. The inspiration and the origins and everything is from there. But the possibility to realize a movie must be brought from abroad. Now they try a bit to change it, and they have a bit more of cameras and something, but yeah, it's moving very slowly, and the country has to face too many problems. So I don't think that you'll have solutions for art very soon. And yes, I did movies without low budget movies, because my last movie, Anishora, is my graduation movie. So I cannot say that I really had good money also to live, but it was not so important at that moment. It was important to make this experiment and this way, this trip in the filmmaking for me. And then I shot in a village in Moldova for seasons, so I was very close to my country, to my people for a long time, and this thankful to Berlin and the infrastructure from there.
Are there still like communities of different nationalities in Berlin, or is it more like melting pot? Because I was several years ago, I met some, let's say, Latvian community, and they used to live together in one apartment and trying to help each other. Is it still going on, or it's completely different? I mean, is it now the melting pot? Everything is, or people just stick to their own people? Yeah.
As far as I know, people and how they live in Berlin, my friends, it's something in between. It's a melting point, and you have the freedom to meet people from your original culture and country and get together from time to time. But I don't know anybody who exclusively lives inside their own, like, ghetto. No, I don't think people go there to search that kind of living.
I disagree a little bit, because to be honest, before I shot, and this might sound wrong, but that was the way it is. Before I shot Victoria, Victoria is based on the dream to rob a bank. Not the most spectacular bank, but just a small bank. And I wanted to talk to people who did it. You know how to not tell me how to make a film about it, but how you want to shoot a film, you need to know this. You want to rob a bank, you need to know this. So I talked to people, and through that I met somebody. In German it's called Intensivtäter. It's somebody that at a very young age is highly criminal, and he has a Lebanese background, and he's really become a friend. He's one funny, crazy, charismatic little motherfucker, and he's full of energy, and he lives in a ghetto. There's a Lebanese, there's in Neukölln, there's a society, there's certain societies, and they live next to each other. I would say I have nothing against hipsters or the hipster bashing. I'm not a big fan of. I love bars, and I love a good cup of coffee, so I have nothing against it. But I would definitely say that, and I'm not an expert on it, but there are parts in Berlin where people, I also know that there's a Russian community that's very tight. I don't see that as anything positive or negative, to be honest, but and I also, maybe on some level I like it, that there's different kind of levels, and that the city is also very mysterious. It has some energies that you don't understand. But as far as I can tell, I mean, you guys gotta let me know. I mean, some guys have lived here a little longer than me in Berlin. But what I think is very special about Berlin is that these, as far as I can tell, these groups don't fight each other. They might fight the government or rob a bank here or there, or do other stuff, whatever, the hipsters buy a little shop and turn it into a bar or whatever, or the micro and the macro aggressions you might have. But the feeling I have more or less on the street in Berlin, that even though all this is going on and I don't understand everything and I'm not a part of every group, I do not feel threatened. and considering how much is going on the surface in Berlin and below the surface in Berlin, it's quite a safe place, I would say. You know, that's pretty extraordinary considering, you know, because it's not lame. The price for it being safe is not lameness, you know, and the price for it being exciting is not that you are really under stress moving about in Berlin.
Yes, Mark, since you were like witnessing the birth of, let's say, some movements in Berlin, like mid 70s and through the 80s and later, what can you tell about how do you see this new energy? Is there a new energy coming there in Berlin? What are the new trends? Because you still are like in the clubs around and you know the scene. Can you tell us like how do you see it as what's going on? And do you miss the past?
Well, I don't miss the past. No, I feel privileged that I've experienced the past and seen these things and been there at the very beginning. Because I find being at the beginning is much more interesting than being at the end.
Yeah, of course.
You know, to be honest, you know, like there's a lot. I go to a lot of parties still, and I go out a lot actually still. My life hasn't really changed very much at all since I've moved really there. And I meet a lot of young, like, you know, 20-somethings who have just arrived in Berlin, and for them, they're creating their own thing. You know, they do their own parties and they have their own ideas. Whether it's something brand new or not, that's quite irrelevant, really. You know, I think that something will evolve eventually out of necessity for something to evolve. And for me, you know, I think Berlin is still the last bastion of free thinking. We were talking about this before. I think this is you know, Berlin has a very different mindset to like London or something, where everyone's constantly thinking about money and about property and about kind of trying to survive. In Berlin, people don't have that pressure so much as in other cities, other big cities. You know, like you try living in Paris or London or, you know, New York or Los Angeles or whatever, and it's a lot different to living in Berlin. And the influx of younger people who come to Berlin, even if they just come for like a short period, I think they want to have this taste of having their Berlin year or 2 years or whatever, because it gives a different perspective on lifestyles. You know, like Berlin's a really good place to discover yourself. You know, to find out who you are, not necessarily just about, you know, being in some kind of scene or whatever. But there are pockets of these people trying to do something new and different. It's just a question of like the newer people coming to Berlin, whether they are open-minded to be able to accept these new things which are going to happen.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one thing I heard, somebody gave me a good definition of what the word perversion means the other day. And he said, perversion means to break the law of the Father. And I like that very much. And I think perversion has a lot of meanings. And I think it's very meaningful for art and for filmmaking. It doesn't have to be perverted on the very first level, but the idea that you are in a surrounding that questions laws and structure and redefines everything, that is very, very helpful for you, you know, coming from a small town or middle-sized town, or actually in my world, from any other town in Germany, or maybe many, many towns around the world. You still find a spirit in Berlin where this kind of perversion is the new rule of the Father. It's a very crazy father there, and and now, you know, watching B-movie last night, and made me realize it once more that that's really the turf of Berlin. You know, that's really how things grow there.
I'm again inviting you if you have any questions. Yeah, it would be great. Yeah. I can give you my microphone. Mine, it's not mine.
Okay. I have a question. What do you think about Berghain And do you agree? What is your opinion on Berghain becoming a part of like cultural heritage or something like that? Your opinion on that? I mean, it's a question for anyone who has been inside of Berghain.
Yeah, all of them.
Okay, good. So
let's start from
ladies first.
I really don't know what to say. I mean, I've been to Berghain a couple of times. It's not that I go there very often. I don't particularly care for this policy of having random rules of who gets in or not. So this is not something that but I mean, it's an important Berlin club. I don't know.
I just want to say I'm a bit I don't the idea of a heritage. I mean, I've seen so many clubs coming and going, and that's what I've said before. That's what I like about Berlin. Things are moving, so there shouldn't be a heritage. If this closed down one day, I mean, okay, for certain people, but it's basically. I'm not even sure if so many Berlin people are going there. It's basically for the tourists. Maybe, I don't know, when I go there, it's Sunday afternoon or something, or Monday morning. So because it opens at Thursday and it goes to Monday evening or something, Monday midday. So I would never go there on Friday or Saturday. And that's really basically tourists or people who are playing there and friends are playing there. So it's also just this touristic thing. I like it because it has the best sound of any club in the world. I would be sad if it's going to be away, but there shouldn't be any heritage of clubs. Things should move to something else, maybe.
We can be thankful that, in a sense, that it's given Berlin a different image, in a sense, Berghain. I mean, when it first opened, I went there quite often, and then as it started to become more, in my opinion, more commercialized, the long lines of people trying to get in and this kind of like image. I mean, a lot of people just go in the hope that they'll get in, and the actual standing in the queue waiting to try and get into the Berghain is the place where you meet the people. Like going clubbing was the place you'd go out in this community, you'd meet people and find new friends or whatever. Now people go to stand in the queue of Berghain in the hope that they're going to find new friends. They know they're never going to get in, and if you're lucky, you might get in.
Who's getting in?
Who's getting in? It's not for me to say. I don't know. It's like whoever you look like. The doorman decides. I don't particularly like this idea. I think everyone should be allowed to experience something like this once in their lives. But they have this specific dress code. I think all the girls look like Lara Croft, and all the guys. I also see the transformation of the people who actually go there. It's become a kind of almost like a gothic evening sometimes. It's like they look all like goths and Lara Crofts kind of mixtures. But that's that moment. This is the point in, that if you look at techno, it's lasted since late 80s. It's a very, very, very long time for a musical trend as such to exist. When I think back to all the other trends of the past, musical trends, they only lasted for like 3 years or 4 years. And then it progressed into something else and changed into something else. And techno has kind of remained this thing in Berlin, this mythical thing in Berlin, which, eventually something different will occur. So people will bring something new to the music scene of our city, and I think that then the Berghain then will realise its position. It has to be able to adapt to be able to continuously exist. But I've seen so many different clubs in Berlin come and go, like others have, and I think that nothing lasts forever.
No, but I think maybe one of the reasons it existed for so long is that it doesn't adapt much. I have to say, and it became the poster boy of the clubs. It has, I think, I don't know, for a while I was thinking about a project that would play a film that would take place in a club like Berghain, so I got to know some people. And I think I think the whole queue and who's being let in and whatever, for me it's, the more you look at it, the more you talk to the people running it. I mean, they're not very talkative, but you spend some time, is you realize they're all from the East and they're proud of it. And the more I think about it, is that they reinvent this border crossing once you go into the club. I mean, it's the exact, it's almost like the club version of the East Berlin border, you know?
Well, it's like in the DDR. If you wanted to get into a club, you had to stand outside in a queue for hours and hours and hours.
No, but I mean, even the procedure, it's like they're checking your passport and they're looking at you. And I mean, it's almost like they're bringing this back to the hipsters, you know, and being proud of that. And for considering, I mean, if you really, the way I understood how the queue works is that they look for people that want to bring something and not tourists that just take something. You need to go there not to watch. You need to go there to be part of it and to bring something to the party, and not just like, oh, I would totally love to take a look at all these crazy people. And I think the more you're willing to bring your own crazy party, whatever creature or whatever, then the higher the chances are you're going to be part of that. Yeah. But I love this idea. I hated it so much. I hate authority. I'm like, I hate, you know, people touching me for fucking what? But then when I realize, oh, I'm just a little Vessi boy that wants to travel, and that's how I'm being treated, then I thought it was very funny.
Maybe one day they'll have like special pass to get into Berghain. You know, you have to apply for it.
Right, a visa.
Like a visa.
I wonder how they prepare the door people. They must make universities how to feel the people who get inside and who not.
I couldn't agree less. It's not about that. It's not about. It is about who you want at your party. You want to party with this person? I think they make it very individually. You want to party because the roots of the Berghain is hardcore gay scene, and if you know, so the roots of the Berghain is some kind of a gay sex club scene, and you don't want people to come to watch for excitement. You want to fuck? Come in. You know, you're just here for the kicks. Go away. And I think that's still, on some level, that's still the key for that, you know. And I'm not sure about the university bit of that.
I don't think there's any kind of like special place where they learn how to be a doorman at the Berghain. You know.
But you could do the course.
I used to be a doorman. At the Metropole, you know, in Loft. I used to, you know, and I would control the people coming in, you know. But I always looked at it as like, how do I want to be treated when I go to a club? You know, I want to be treated in a civilized manner and stuff. So I treated people in the same way.
But again, I think the Berghain people get a kick out of treating you like shit.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And people obviously do too.
I'm sure they do. Yeah. It's this perversion that they like.
Yeah. Maybe some other question right now? No? Yeah. Yeah. There is a small thing, since none of you were born in Berlin. What can you tell, maybe you, Wolfgang, how do you see the typical guy who's born and raised in Berlin? Is it like different than all the people who came and, yeah? Or?
I mean, actually, I don't know so many people who were born in Berlin. There are really few. It's really like a melting pot, and it's so many different people you get to know, but it's really rare that I know a guy who was born in Berlin.
I think it's interesting. Most of my friends who are really born in Berlin are from the East. Just two are from the West. And Eunice, a very good friend, is a real Berliner. She was born there. She lived most of her life in Berlin. But her father is Portuguese and she is a Belgian citizen. So I think that kind of shows you.
maybe some question just appeared. Well, this is really a huge topic, so yeah, we can go for hours, but we have just some time to do this. So last thing, I would just love to ask you, were you like proud to represent Berlin when you got the invitation to come here and represent the city of Berlin? Or did you think about why me and why not someone else? Yeah, that could be just the question.
I always think, why me?
Being proud to live in a city is stupid.
Yeah, but to represent it, to be representative.
I don't feel like a representative of Berlin. I'm here for my films and I'm here for myself. But I'm quite often taken to represent, because most of my films are dealing with the city, so or the most influence came from the city. So I'm also thankful. Like Mark said, I'm very grateful to live a certain period in this city, and I can give it back. But I'm not a tourist manager who said, "Wow, great city." I feel very like I said, I have always had this ambient feeling, ambivalent feeling. Yeah, I don't feel like I love the city. I will always, even if I move away, I will always love the city. But yeah, so I'm not a representative of the city. Are you?
Am I a representative of the city? I don't know, but I think we as a group of chosen representatives from Berlin, I like the group. I think we are quite representative for what's going on in Berlin right now. Yeah, but me, for myself, I feel pressure to introduce you Berlin, because I don't know myself so much about it, and I have only my own perspective, and we're here for our works.
Yeah, I also would feel way too lame to be a representative. If I think, you know, I try my share, but this city is, I'm not proud to represent it, but I'm very happy it exists. I'm very happy about that, definitely.
What was the question? I'm not from the tourist office from Berlin, so I mean, I like the city very much, and I like the variety, I like the movement, I like that it's a very dynamic city. You don't have any capital city in Europe which is so dynamic, it's changing permanently, and which areas are, now to say, hip to go there, I mean, it's changing, and all other big cities, London, Paris, it's completely settled. There is no movement anymore. It's a museum, and that's why I like Berlin very much, and I like to stay there even longer.
Anyway, we can, yeah. We can go like confessions of...
well, you know, with my film, I've kind of like noticed that people see me as some kind of ambassadorial role of like this bygone era of a city which people will no longer be able to experience. But I see more my film as being a kind of stepping stone for people to be inspired. You know, that's the whole idea behind B-Movie for me, and one of the motivators for me want to participate in this film was because I saw it as a moment to be able to show other generations in the future what we did back then and how we did it without any kind of financial backing or without any kind of internet or social media and all these kind of things that you have today. We did this out of passion for, you know, just wanting to do something and to kill the boredom, if you like. You know, we needed something to do, and to have, when you have a spontaneous idea and you just follow it through, and that's something which young people, I feel, don't realise that it's possible to do, and I hope that by watching B-Movie they can see that it is possible to do, and not just Germans and not just people living in our world, but like taking it into really weirder places like China and Asia, and giving them this inspiration as well, like, you know, South America and things. It gives them an idea that, oh yeah, we can also do this, and they don't necessarily have to come to Berlin to experience it, but maybe they can try it in their own place, you know. So I see Berlin as a representative of Berlin in a sense. That way, yes, I do. Yeah. I do feel that now. I never did at the beginning, but I've come to realise that this is a sort of a role that I have acquired over this period of doing this movie, and representing a Berlin of a bygone age, but at the same time of contemporary Berlin as well. And I think that everyone should have a go at having their Berlin year. It'll be an inspiration, regardless of whatever happens when you go there.
I have a question I wanted to ask you earlier, Mark, and what I was thinking when I saw the film yesterday. It seemed like when you went to Berlin in the late 70s, I was amazed how small the scene appeared to be. Like everybody was, it almost felt like, or looked like everybody's going to the same bars pretty much, and sooner or later you would run into everybody. For me, that portrayed drew a picture of course that is super creative if people spend so much time together. You were part of that too, and I had a feeling that it was a different thing to be an outsider back then, to be an outcast, to be marked as no good or whatever, and that has become so much the center of culture. Now everybody's an outsider, everybody's a freak, nobody works for the man anymore. That has become a mainstream identity. Does that make sense to you, or how does that feel to both of you, to be honest?
For me, like our microcosm which we lived in, we were, in a sense, we were the outside. So the general, normal, everyday life, they didn't even know we existed most of the time. Like I met people who've seen B-movie, and they said, I didn't even know this existed, this scene. They didn't even know it was there. Even if, like, Einstürzen and Neubauten were in the newspaper, it kind of passed them by. They didn't know it existed, and so the outsider has become the insider, in a sense now.
No, but energy-wise also, it seemed like...
We were a very small scene, and we would always go to the same places. There was always the same people you saw, always the same. But in the sense that the techno thing was the same as well. It was exactly the same. It was a very, very, very small scene. It was even, like equally on terms as the early 80s avant-garde music scene, new wave scene. When I first came to Berlin, all the guys looked like Jesus. They all had like long hair and beards and flared trousers. You do? No, I didn't know. I just come from punk rock, and I was kind of like, why is there no punk rock? Have you not heard of it? But I found a small enclave in Berlin that had heard of punk rock and they were kind of excited about this new ideas and new ideas of doing things. But it was a very small scene. And 10 years later, the techno scene, if you like, was also it was a one club, UFO, that was it. And because one woman, Monica Dietl, she had a radio show on the radio, on SFB radio. She would like talk about clubbing nights and things like this. And all these kids in East Berlin all thought that this scene was a huge scene. Right, because it was on the radio. Because in the DDR, the radio was the voice of the people, and it kind of like was something special. Whereas in West Berlin, it was a little bit different. But they didn't know this, and they thought that the techno scene was this massive movement of people all going out clubbing, raving. They'd heard all this kind of stuff. They didn't realise that there was only one club with 100 people, and so when they came, they were like, "Where is it? Where is the scene? Where's this party scene?" And they had to create it themselves out of necessity because they were so desperate to do something different that was not dictated by the state. And that was the first time since maybe the 20s that young people could decide for themselves what they wanted to actually listen to, and it wasn't this like regurgitated representative music from the DDR. It wasn't the kind of rock progressive music from Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin. It was music without lyrics. It was techno music. It was electronic. It was futuristic. It was that music of that moment, and that kind of like blew up Berlin, really, in a sense. It created this whole new thing, and we had this huge playing field called the Death Strip, where all these like derelict buildings were, which were part of the border area, and that was the, you know, the open gate really to create this brand new way of thinking in our city as well. You know, we had gone beyond a even freer thought, you know, and I think that opened a lot of people's perspectives and possibilities to, you know, I have an idea and I can realize this idea without any kind of financial backing of any kind. It was taking what we did in the 80s one step further. Right now it's all become a little bit more corporate, you know, like we're back to rules and regulations, and it's time for us to break those rules and regulations, because rules and regulations are there to be broken.
Yeah, so maybe just to finish.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's really great how the city said yes to me. You know, because when you come to a city, you just feel something, and it was like an embrace. Stay, and I think Berlin is very generous, and from this sense, and they, and also very. I think it's a city of freaks. I'm a freak too, and I feel home and I feel good there. So it's the place where you can be different and how you want. You can be like I don't know what can surprise somebody in Berlin. I have no idea. Normality maybe, yeah. But even this you have in the other parts of Berlin. You find everything, you know. Everybody can make his life like he wants, and that's great about Berlin.
And this is pretty much how I feel about it. You use the word pride, which makes me a little bit cringe, because I think being proud about belonging to something can lead to very dodgy situations. And I think it's also in English, it's the deadly sin, isn't it? The pride. So I would never say I'm proud, but I did realize recently that I do identify with the city in a very strange situation. I've seen a film clip when they blew up the Anhalter Bahnhof after the Second World War, and since I live just in front of it, I was like really sad. I was like, wow, this is in front of my house. And then I realized I actually do feel at home there. But on the other hand, I do feel at home in Zagreb very much so as well. And when Corinne and I went to London last time, I was like, wow, the London smells, I know it very well. And this is the thing that I can identify in Berlin, that I'm free to feel like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Nika. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Uli. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Sebastian. And thank you, Wolfgang. Yeah. Let's applaud at the end.
Chwala.
Who is moving next to Berlin?
I'm visiting my brother.
Perfect. Just to put you can just stay here.
Yeah, you can stay at Mark's place. You're gonna stay.